The generative capabilities of Pattern Engine, initially inspired by the ML185 sequencer, which some of you may have already used. Amazing free Max for Live sequencer. But I wanted to be able to randomize and permutate the sequence ongoingly for some installation work I was doing. And Pattern Engine came out of a way of trying to solve that problem. And as so often happens along the way, I ended up discovering all kinds of other capabilities that inevitably I added in over time. So I'm going to start, I think, with a wavetable. It's pretty simple and straightforward for me. I'll get to this breakbeat I prepared a little bit later on. And yeah, I'll just go ahead and drop the Pattern Engine directly prior to it. And this being live 12, it's going to automatically adopt the C minor. Let's just make it a D minor. Actually, let's try G minor today. G minor. And as I change that up there, as above, so below, it's inherited just the same in Pattern Engine. And so Pattern Engine, it is limited to 16 steps, but as you'll see throughout today's session, there's so many ways you can expand beyond those 16 steps with the LFOs, with the interval randomization, with the new sort of mute sequencing. And yeah, it's a lot of fun, but the most fun you can have with it right away, right out of the box, is just to smash this global randomization button one time. And let's just hear how that sounds. Okay, something I can work with. And this clip that I made earlier, even though it's a drum clip, it's set to C minor. So let's just keep everything in G minor. That's so confusing when that happens. Okay, and to make it a little more techno-y, I think I will do a few things to the wavetable here. Let's get it in a mono mode with some glide. Okay, and then probably one of my favorite features is the random modulator. Just drop that on the wavetable position just to make it a little more dynamic. A little touch of reverb. And it's a little bit high, so I can drop it down in octaves here. Nice, Kev, an OG, Pattern Engine V1, shouting it out. I love that. Hopefully you'll get some new tricks out of this today. So what's actually going on here, right? So we have 16 steps, each one of which has a pitch, an on-off mute step, a velocity, a length, and a tie to hold it to the next note. So if I tie both of these, I guess the rest is cutting it off, but yeah. Interesting. I'm on 12.2 at the moment, so it wasn't really an issue. It's just that technically I made this clip earlier when I was still in C minor. Anyway, yeah. Feel free to keep commenting in the chat, but I also need to remind myself not to get too distracted. So I can turn different steps off and on, obviously, and play with, let's make this one way shorter. And to really emphasize that, I'm just going to go and shorten the release time of the synth so we can hear those note lengths a little more precisely. And I can change the pitch. And the pitches are key relative. So if I change the key here or here again, then whatever that root note is becomes the relative zero of all the steps in the default mode here. So, I showed how we can quickly randomize a pattern. And, as I do this over and over, I like to have a little capture track set up because already this first sequence, it's got a little something to it. I think I want to capture a bit of that. There are a variety of ways to do this, but I'm going to keep changing the wavetable, showing different features as we go along. So just, to be safe and out of best practices, maybe it's nice to have this MIDI track set up here. I'll just set it to receive from wavetable, and now whenever I get a sequence I like, I can just track it in. And if I make changes, all those changes are recorded dynamically here in the MIDI clip that's been recorded. And worth pointing out that all transposition changes to Pattern Engine remain constrained to the scale and key that's been selected. So that helps keep everything real nice and musical. Yeah, so the other function, well, actually, let me just demonstrate something before I get into all the auto-randomization. Let's talk about the mutes. So right now, we've got certain steps off and certain steps on. And this invert button, it's going to turn all the steps that are on off and all the ones that are off on. So it's inverting. So if I were to take a couple of these other ones out, make it a little more interesting, and then switch it over. That's a cool little sequence, right? Then you can just flip it over. So things like this are really fun. Hidden little performance features that I think go a long way. We can also define the length of the cycle up here. And let me just get all those activated. So this button above it turns all steps on or off. And because a few of them were off, it turned all of them on, and then it becomes a simple on-off toggle. I think there's maybe a little too much randomization here. Getting that little 5/4 techno action. Okay, so yeah, let's do even like a 6/4 hemiola sort of thing. And then we can tell it to reset in bars. So every bar, it restarts on the downbeat, or every 2 bars. So you can create all kinds of rhythmic intersections here. We can also move the start point around to kind of explore different patterns that exist. Even just switching between those two, I'm inspired to grab another take here. And there's other ways to capture and record this that we'll get to look at later on. I think that's enough of those two. Right? Okay, and so that's just a quick look at, the cycle selection stuff. And this can be really useful, you'll see coming up. Let's just go back to a 16-bar cycle, or a 16-step cycle rather. So I can show what these new little grid indicators are doing. So let's say I want, okay, how do I explain this best? So this indicator advances every cycle, whatever the length of the cycle is. So if I reduce the cycle length to 7, these are jumping through every 7 steps now instead of every 16. So it's relative to the length of the cycle, which makes it extra flexible. So now I can say, I'll make this a really high note so that you can see out of 8 iterations of the 7-step cycle, the first one doesn't play and the third one doesn't play. And we can actually shorten that to say, just give this one step 3 cycles. So now it's only going to play every third time it cycles through the 7 steps of the pattern. And this is a global length for all of those mute masking sequences that's what I chose to call them, for lack of a better term. So now they're all set to 4, right? So let's set this to 8-beat cycle, be a little more intelligible, I think. And so let's do this one. So now it'll play either this one or this one, because they're happening at different passes through the 4 cycles available to them. You can get really intricate with this sort of stuff. It's pretty fun, and it's one of the many ways I described that can unfold a seemingly static sequence into a much longer, sprawling pattern. Another way to obtain that sort of feeling would be, I'll take this last step here, and let's have it controlled by LFO1. Now, by default, LFO1 doesn't do anything to it because there's no motion assigned. So we have to assign some motion to it. And now it starts moving up and down at the rate specified here. If I want it to be sort of anchored a little higher up, then I'm put the center up an octave. So the shift up and down arrows, wherever applicable, move things up and down an octave at a time, wherever relevant, any semitone value sliders anywhere in Pattern Engine. So now we've got this skeletal structure of a simple half bar, 8-step cycle. 2 of the steps of which are alternating which bars they play, and then this 8th step is moving up and down. Now we can choose different LFO shapes, of course, and we can use a synchronized rate with the same base rate, multiplier, and divisor that should be familiar from our other devices. And then smoothing and jitter are applied globally to all 4 LFOs. They're deactivated by default just to save a little CPU, but as soon as you activate, for example, LFO 3 on any step, boom, LFO 3 is active now. Isn't that nice? Let's set that to a triangle, for example. And again, of course, we need to apply some motion. Now, you might be looking at this and thinking, oh, but what if I want to then go back and adjust the mute sequence for this? Well, I just click that X to go back to either the native pitch mode parameters or the mute sequencer. So it's all there for you. It just likes to hide depending on the mode you've selected. So again, there's a half bar sequence of only 8 steps, and now it's just moving all over the place. Now you might be wondering what these locks are about. Those really come into play when we get into the auto-randomization feature, which maybe it's worth discussing. But again, I think this is starting to cook a little bit, so I'm going to go ahead and record a few bars of this. And sometimes I like to watch those pretty MIDI notes just arrive in my clip. Isn't that nice? Yeah, we're going to get into some fun tricks of how to use this MIDI and get it even more dynamic and interesting, but I thought that wavetable was a good starting point. I think that's more than enough. I just want to capture enough to make sure I captured some of the motion of those different LFOs. I can see it going up and down a few times there. One of them was a 4-bar pattern, but the other was something less regular. Okay. So before I look into using this on some completely different sounds, I do notice there's 42% swing on the drum that has not been applied here. So let's go ahead and get that swing going. That might be a little strong. Let's see. Now, so long as it's set to receive mode, I can start pressing notes on any MIDI controller connected, so long as the track is armed for MIDI, right? I'll disable this one for now. So I'm just tapping different notes on the keyboard as a way to transpose the sequence. Pretty basic sequencer behavior, but allows you to interact with it performatively in a way that's really engaging and fun, I think. We've got our different directions here, so we can play it backwards. We can play it forward and backwards. Starting to cook again. Need to grab some more of this. I'll grab 8 bars. I think that's 9 bars actually, but better safe than sorry. And then we can also select a random step from the steps available. So you can create curated randomness, right? So you can set up 4 steps with different settings, and you're not doing a complete randomization like Chance Engine within the full range of MIDI notes. It's within those 4 notes you've selected. For example, if I set this to 4, it's too good. I'm sorry. No, I'm not. Having fun. So it's just selecting randomly between those 4 steps that are currently allowed at the moment. Okay. The point is not to go total rando mode. Let's keep it going forward on the 16th note. And yeah, we can change the bass timing of the pattern. So 30-second notes or, you know, 8th note dotted. And these changes to the timing are enforced at the next downbeat to ensure that they stay, you know, more or less in sync with the rest of your set. And we can also multiply. So 3 16th notes, 2 16th notes. And we can also divide if you want to go totally crazy. The last thing I'll show before moving on to some of the auto-randomization capabilities, which really unlocks the power of this device, is we've got some different modes here, right? So gate mode, it's only going to play when I hold a MIDI note down, and because receive is enabled, it's also repitching it. And I just, you know, I'll end up doing that all day long if you let me. Side mode will keep playing until I press a MIDI note and then it stops. So it's like a MIDI sidechain. But we can also use a trigger mode. So now rather than having any sort of rate, it's now going to be triggered, advanced from one step to the next via whatever arbitrary MIDI note pattern you send it. So I'm just going to stick to C3 because I don't want to be transposing it with these, but let's go and do like this. So you can see it advancing at this irregular pattern as triggered by the MIDI input. The back mode means that the pattern will go back to the start when I press a new note. But then what you might be most interested in is art mode. Oh, and art mode is going crazy because it's still receiving the MIDI trigger. So let me stop that clip, right? So So what ARP mode does is it enables receive mode if that's not currently the case. It enforces the gate mode, so the sequence will only play while a note is held. And also, the sequence will be restarted to the first step whenever you press it. And that's really interesting that you brought up the take lanes, Kev, because we're going to use those to record it to sort of capture some auto-randomization, which we might as well get into next. In terms of creating it natively, that's interesting. I'm not sure if I need to add that extra layer of complexity to it, but it's enticing. I'm never one to shy away from extra levels of complexity. We can also reset at the next beat here. Okay, I need to breathe for a moment, so I'm just going to pause, let that reverb carry out. Yeah, so we have these different selectors here. We can set all the steps to manual mode. And manual mode, this is the pitch mode of all the steps. And manual mode is basically the same as engaging the lock. What it means is it will not be subject to auto-randomization. You change it manually, and it will be saved with a live set. If I click undo, yeah, it's not going to quite take care of all those. But now if I click the random button here, it's still, as part of the random button methodology, it knows you want to randomize everything, so it puts everything to chance mode. However, if I put it to manual and engage auto-random, it does not randomize them at the interval here, which auto-random is designed to do. This allows you to protect the pitch of specific steps that you don't want to change. So let me just go, let's turn all the mutes back on. And let's lock a few steps and set a few of them to manual. And so let's say I want this one always on and this one always on. And let's say I want the first and the ninth always off. So I'm going to lock the mutes to off here and these ones on. And I'm going to set all the steps to chance except for this second locked one that's on, which I'll set to manual. And we'll put it up there somewhere. And this other one that's locked, let's put that back to LFO 3. Okay, so what's happening right now? Every 2 bars, all of the parameters that aren't locked are being randomized by 50% because I clicked the global auto-randomization. And that turns auto-randomization on for all 5 of the parameter lanes: mute, pitch, velocity, length, and tie. But I could also do that individually for each one. So I could say just randomize the pitch and the length every 2 bars. I can also set it to randomize them every 4 bars, to randomize them by way more, and you notice these sliders also go higher to randomize everything way more. But I can also say, let's randomize the mute by just a little bit, but slightly more often, so every 2 bars. And let's randomize the pitch every 8 bars. And the velocity, length, and tie, yeah, let's have those change every 4 bars, for example. And to different degrees, to different amounts, okay? And these all have ranges within which they can be randomized. So, for example, the pitch gets randomized in this range, velocity here, and the note lengths within this range. Anyway, enough talk, let's hear. And the beauty of this is it begins to permutate and randomize in a generative way that's controlled, certain steps are exempted from the randomization by being set to manual or by having their parameters locked. Let's lock their velocities also, for example. And while this is happening, we can still transpose with a MIDI input or any other way. And you know, it's worth mentioning that the MIDI, and so looks like I'm buffering, but I'll be back shortly. All right, internet should be back if it's not already. Thanks for sticking it out, everybody. Yeah, so I don't know where exactly that dropped out, but what I did was I created this MIDI clip here just to transpose it from something a little more reliable than my real-time input, which is off camera, so you can't really see it. So you can hear it getting pitched down to the G2, C3. And this is just continuously generating this output. So this is again where you might want to consider getting some of that. Nice. This thing, it has a penchant for spitting out some real magic. You gotta be careful and capture this lightning in a clip. And you know, it's probably gonna be worth sifting through and selecting the choice bits, but all too many times I found myself regretting not recording. Okay, so that's good for now, but let's look at another method of this. So let's set it to 100% randomization every 4 bars, and I'm going to click this key to unlock all the locked steps. Boom. Everything is subject to randomization except for the manual steps. Let's set those back to chance. So I like to set it to 4 bars because that gives me enough time to like decide if a sequence is worth hanging on to, which this one is clearly not. Okay, and I like this one, so I punched out of the auto-randomization mode, and now I can work with it. And I've got a little basic pattern there, and I'm just gonna stop the transposition clip because it's adding a little too much sauce. Oh, and these still have their mute sequences enforced, so those were, I had not reset those, so I'm just gonna set those back to full. And now, like, let's say I'm 90% happy with the sequence. This might be a good time to say, you know what, I actually want that note, the 3, to be 1 note earlier and maybe 1 octave higher. And turn that note off. And then, so, you know, you can let it sort of auto spiral through these unfurling patterns. Turn the auto randomization off when you got something good, and maybe it's just a couple little tweaks away from real gold or whatever it is you might be looking for. Yeah. So I wanted to try something today. Let's see how it goes. I'm gonna group this to a rack, And let's put it in an octave zone selector. And I think I want it to, well, actually, let me populate this with other instruments before I get ahead of myself here. So I want the low end to be more just like operator-ish, a little more sine wave situation. So let's have that one down below. And I think I'd like it to have some similar glide going on there. I'll go ahead, set that to one single solitary voice and give a little glide. Maybe a little FM. Okay, and then, like, what if I gave ourselves a little octave in the middle there, in which we could put, perhaps, just bear with me here, a collision? I'm having a real hard time grabbing the zone selectors today with this enlarged mouse I went with. Let's set it to a marimba. Okay. Give it a little more brightness. So now it's one sequence unfolded into this call and response between three different instruments now. And, you know, one of the questions that often comes up with Pattern Engine is it polyphonic? It is not. But I can go ahead and put a scale-aware chord just on the collision. Let's try that. And I think what I want to do is actually grab, I had to do it, grab a little chance engine here, and it's getting two notes there. It's doubling up, I think. I'll have to take a look at that later on. Never seen that before. What I wanted to do is just randomize the octave. But I'll find another way to do that now. Let's go ahead and just grab a little pitch here. And then okay, so can I automate those buttons? I can't. Dang. What I'm going to do now is grab one of our modulators, the MIDI auto dubber, and don't worry, I'm going to get back to some Pattern Engine stuff momentarily, but what I want to do is okay, and I want it unipolar. And now I gotta just dial this down to where it's okay, so the collision needs work. It's a little too nice. really doing the trick for me either. I'll figure out that octave thing later, if it's even needed, because it didn't even sound that great anyway. Just ideas. But let's go back to the Chance engine and look at using that as another generative source of transposition. So where was I? There we are, my old friend. Okay, so let's set it to G, and let's have it play a whole note times 2, so 2 bars, and then randomize the pitch of that. So every 2 bars, we're getting a transposition going through. And you know, we could play with these zone ranges a little bit, or put some different instruments on there. Obviously, you can send these to external instruments as well. And with that transposition, it's moving more notes onto the collision, I notice. And so I'm not totally sold on the collision, in fact. And I'm just going to pitch all this down 1 octave. And what I like to do with the reverb everything is sent to, you know, as I've probably shown before, is I just have a steep high pass before the long reverb so that only the high notes are going to reach it. Okay, so we need some more drums going on. These drums are fine and everything, but I think but I got this little breakbeat prepared, and I thought it would be useful to look at using Pattern Engine on drums. A little shout out to Lewis on the Discord, who posted something really cool going on with a sliced simpler, and I said, what's the MIDI effect rack that's triggering that? He said, it's a Pattern Engine. I was like, wow, okay, how have I not done that before? So today's the day. I decided to play around, and so I've already prepared and sliced the breakbeat, and we're not hearing anything here because it's not in the right octave range. So this is also something that bears repeating. You know, it's inheriting the G minor by default, but if you want to work with drums, you probably don't want to be in the scale and key, so that's when you're going to click the global icon. This goes for all of our devices, and set it to chromatic. The key is irrelevant at that point. And then we're going to drop this down. Well, actually, what I can do is just drop the pitch range, randomization range down, something like that, because I believe these start at C1. Let's try. I'm going to hit the randomize button. Okay, and let's turn all the mutes on. And I think we need the same swing as everything else, right? Or else we're going to get in trouble. Okay, so there's something going on. But I think it'd be a lot more dynamic if it were auto-randomizing, don't you? So I'm going to flip that on for everything except the mutes. And the ties are irrelevant. I think the length is irrelevant too, unless I put it in gate mode. And what else is kind of harming this is that I need to, pull the pitch range down a little bit, because all the slices, they always start at C1 and we're in G and all that sort of thing. Although maybe if I just, even though it's chromatic, I said the key's irrelevant, it's not irrelevant because it defines the bass pitch setting. So now I can more confidently set this to -24 and we should be good. And there's some jaunty randomizing percussion. I'm just going to turn these ones off. I don't have to lock it because the mute is not enabled for auto-randomization, and I can actually manually randomize each individual lane one at a time as well. Let's go back to our instrument rack here. And what I want to do is show, yes, of course, the advanced pitch randomization. We got a little gear icon and all steps that are in chance mode. So for example, not LFO steps or manual steps, but all steps that are set to pitch randomization. We now access this dialog, and we can select a different randomization algorithm just for that specific step. An individual randomization percentage also for that specific step, and a randomization range for that specific step. This is the kind of meticulous granularity that Pattern Engine makes possible. Let's do that for, let me find, yeah, let's do this let's do this one between, where was it, 11 and 33. I'll just type in, and let's set it to the fluid mode, which is a more sort of lyrical, quasi-drunk style. And of course, that's only going to be evident if we enable the auto-randomization. And we can just close that out here. And so now this is really tumbling around. We're getting all these 4-bar randomizations going. So I think it's time to head on over to the arrange view. And in this case, I'm going to enable the loop brace. And I'm going to stop playback because the loop brace is back here at bar 1. And so if I want to start recording take lanes, then I need to enable recording here. Now, those funny chords there. Okay, I don't really love what's happening now, and I might just remove all the rack stuff. It's going a little crazy. It's a good opportunity to maybe focus back on the device itself, but I think that this is a really unique recording method, right? So I'm gonna enable this track, get rid of all that, unnecessary, irrelevant, goodbye, and now we can use our take lane selection to combine sections from our favorite takes. Not so sold on that one. Drums need work, but there's a little something going on there. All right, so now I would, consolidate that. Just consolidate it and copy that to a new clip slot here. And I can call that comped. Okay, so as mentioned, I'm not really sold on a few things here. For example, the chance engine transposition, I'll just set the play to 0%. And I think that maybe also I'm going to, it's not hurting so much having the collision in there. I got self-conscious about it, but let's just plow ahead. I'll come back to that later. Yeah, what I want to explore here, back to the pattern engine, is this idea of, locking steps and parameters in to create sort of a skeletal structure around which other components will change and evolve, right? So I'm doing that with these other steps here, and I'm going to lock these as muted, right? And now I can enable all these other auto-randomizations. Why does it seem so similar to the other pattern? So funny. Yeah, let's just go ahead and I think I'm gonna maybe deploy the collision in a different way, but yeah, I'm going to group the rack to a rack and disable it. And from the disabled rack, I'm going to option drag the wavetable back into the top of the rack. So I still have it in here if I decide to go back to that. But yeah, I want to explore this idea of sort of skeletal structures within the pattern engine around which things rotate. But I'd be remiss not to show a couple other really interesting uses that you might not expect or intuitively land on. The first of which is what can be done with just a single step. So now I've just got it down to step 15. Let's turn the tie off so it's a little more staccato. And now what I want to do is set it to be controlled by LFO2. I'm going to set LFO2 to a square wave. And let's make it quite fast. And I'll bring the center up. So it's just choosing between those two values, the minimum and maximum defined by that range of motion. And because I've set it to a non-synchronized rate, it's doing all kinds of weird rhythmic stuff, right? So like maybe I'll just record that out and I'm going to use that on a different synth. Look at that. Okay, so I'll put that over here for use later on. I'm going to call it pattern perk or something like that. And yeah, so where was I? Okay, right. So that's a fun thing you can do. We're like toggling between the two different minimum maximums. We can do that also randomly with the bins mode, which is a minimum maximum random value thing, which I could do synchronized, and it would produce a very similar effect, I think. So let's just set that to 16th note as well. Yes, hard vision in the building. It's been far too long. Exciting. How to use a single step of a sequencer to make weird rhythmic patterns. There we go, there's something. Well, percolating along. And so these patterns might be even further enhanced by using some MIDI tools to transform them later. But I'm going to try and stay focused as best I can. So let's go to the most shamelessly over the top use of pattern engine, in my view, which is I'm going to disable the LFOs. I'm going to set all the steps to chance. I'll turn them all on. I'm going to set the cycle to, let's do 3. Let's do a 3-step cycle. And I'm going to auto-randomize the pitch. Very good. Every 4 bars. Let's try that. So now this is what I think I made a preset out of this that comes with Pattern Engine, which I refer to as Auto-trance, which is a misspelling of trance. Auto-trance. We can also do it like this. Turn the glide off. Or I could simply disable the tie randomization. And then, you know, at that point, perhaps we might wish to re-enable our little transposition on the input. Yes. We are auto-trancing the apocalypse here, my friends. Auto-trancing the utopia, bringing it into existence, I hope. Okay, so, you know, obviously just let this roll, let it go all day, or, you know, transpose it real time with a little bit of MIDI input, as you like. And then go ahead and open up your cycle length, add a little reset in bars. Yeah, I'm sorry the push isn't on camera, but I'm just triggering different notes in scale to transpose it, which you can do with any MIDI controller. Push is not required, and all the transposition, again, of course, stays within the scale and key, including the manual transposition with that slider there. And if we set the pitch randomization to 2 bars, I wonder how that'll go. And there were some of those advanced randomizations. Let me open that back up. But actually, this is a great example of where these advanced per step randomization ranges might come in handy. So let's make sure this step is always randomizing those lower octaves, and this one is always in those higher octaves. And to give it a little more predictability or regularity, so to say, I could also, this would be a good example to show the decide mode. So the decide algorithm, basically, it's similar to using the bins mode with LFO. It defines these not as a range, but as the 2 choices that it will randomize between. So now it'll either be 7 or -7, or 7 or -5, let's say. And that's being randomized again every 2 bars. You can change the interval here. Okay. And so it goes. I think I did advertise endless patterns here. So now maybe it's time to go back and review some of the stuff that came out of this earlier on by simply, well, actually, before we do that, let's look again at doing this polyphonically. Yeah, let's grab a drift, I guess, right? We're trying to keep it sort of techno-ish. Okay. And so now, what did I say? That's right. So, you know, just throw a chord on there if you're looking for something more polyphonic. But this auto-trance kind of starts to become a little intense. So I like to maybe open it back up, allow some of the steps to breathe a little bit, give it some mute randomization. And let's see what comes out of this sort of configuration now. Some velocity, some length. The hold, maybe not so nice when it's polyphonic. Let's try. Let's give it a shot. And see, oh, I didn't catch it in time because it's set to 2 bars on the pitch. So this is why I like to have that 4-bar length, because I wanted to grab that one auto-randomized pattern. And I turned it off. So here we go. No, not quite. Okay, this is something I can work with, and it goes to show, like, you land on these patterns, and then, for example, I don't like that first step. Yeah, there's something there. And, you know, maybe it's worth mentioning what really drove me to create this device, and many others like it. Whoops, I don't want to create a new track. I want to create a new scene. Is I got really tired of just making what felt like the same sorts of patterns, melodies, and rhythms over and over again. I just felt I had fallen into certain habits in my production. It grew frustrating over time. And so, you know, maybe this is obvious to many of you, but yeah, I created these tools to help access ideas I wouldn't arrive at any other way. And this tool in particular, the pattern engine, I find one of the most powerful for really exploring so much different terrain in what some people have called design space, to pilot through design space and see what latent possibilities exist out there. So here we've got our little chord pattern. It appears not to have captured the chords, but I'm going to say add chord +4 on that one. A little reminder for later. It's because I would have had to record from the drift post effects. Yes. Let me just verify. Yeah, there we go. And so, you know, once you've got things kind of working and generating here, it's almost like an abundance of riches. Like, you need to then really focus in. Like, I've got maybe 5 or 6 tracks worth of pretty dynamic melodic stuff going on that I could expand on and work with into something more developed. It's a matter of choosing which one and you know, making those choices to refine it. But then a lot of the other advanced features that you find in Pattern Engine came out of, you know, what I just described with looking for ideas outside of my own head or whatever, habits. But I also started using it, as I mentioned at the very start, for these long-form generative installation works. It involves some interactivity where maybe a participant would trigger some change in the MIDI, would maybe trigger a transposition or a randomization. And so I needed to have all these different things where I could talk to other components, and that swing is not the same. And so in addition to that, for these installations to run, I really had to make sure everything was stable. And there are a lot of tricks you have to do with Ableton to avoid, you know, spamming the undo history and all this stuff to ensure that these generative tools can continue running for those longer periods of time. So, yeah, we've looked at a lot of stuff here. Let's take one of these patterns. Let's go back to one of the earlier patterns. I want to look at a fun thing to create a pad with. Let's do a little taste test of one of these on the drift I'm currently working with. I'll just disable pattern engine. And let's hear it. Turn the chord off. I don't think that's one of the stronger ones. Let's try this one. I think the glide was doing a lot of the heavy lifting on this one, right? So maybe these are better auditioned through the wavetable. Yeah, that's more like it. That's what I was working with at the time. And then what I'll find is that maybe I decide later on that for the feel of it, I want a little offset on the start point. And so now I'm going to create a little pad from that same MIDI clip, show you a fun little trick I like to do lately. And yeah, let's go and just grab something a little more high frequency with the noise unison. I'm going to option drag this same clip, and what I'm going to do, it might be a little too stacked, but I'm going to select all the notes and go to my ChronoFlex MIDI tool, and I'm just going to smush them all together. Look at that, one big chord. I think it's going to be way too intense. But, so, you know, maybe it's better used, this technique, when you have a element. Nice, welcome. Low res as well. How is it going? Exciting to see everybody here. Yeah, so this technique might work a little better when you've got fewer notes in a smaller range, but I've just kind of condensed all those down to a pad that's going to be super loud, so I better turn that down. So it's all the same notes present in this MIDI pattern, now going through this pad, which obviously needs some LFO on the wavetable position, or else what are we doing with our lives? Wow, that's just way too fast. All right, there's all kinds of generative MIDI stuff going on. Let's look at some other ways we can manipulate this material generated with the pattern engine using some of the MIDI tools I've created. So, for example, let's see. I want to try using the transcoder Yeah, let's go to draw mode. Select all of these. And pull them up and then down. And then way up. Expand that range. I don't know. Let's see what kind of shape that imposes here. Just adding some curve to these pitch impositions as we transcode. Okay, that's a little too tropical or something. Kind of nice. And I love the tropics, but it could be a nice little change up. Whoa! Okay. Forget everything I just said. The tropics are awesome. This rules. Not for the whole song, of course, but tropical mindset. And then we can go back to our main pattern here. I'll just call this standard mindset. Is this something people do? I think that's the first time I've ever put an emoji in one of my clip names, which is actually quite strange now that I think about it. Okay. This wavetable, yeah, it has some sub there. We could go back to our main instrument rack. The operator and collision are not happening so much. I guess, you know, maybe what I need to do at that point is just grab a little pitch. So again, for those who tuned in a bit later, I was feeding the pattern engine through this instrument rack that has different instruments broken out into different octave ranges on the keyboard using the key zone selector. So I put a chord on this collision, then we have this operator down below. Yeah, let me go ahead and drop a little auto dubber on the instrument rack. Oh yeah, and there's one other thing I wanted to show on the breakbeat. But yeah, we need some auto dubber on here because I want those intermittent dub throws at unpredictable intervals, and I don't want to do it myself. Yeah, definitely this sounds better lower on the instrument rack. Agreed. What was I doing? Oh yeah. Here we go. Little auto dubber on here. I'm gonna go ahead and map these. So 50% of every quarter note. Let's say 50% of every third quarter note. Let's say 25% chance every third quarter note will go to maximum. And I'll map that to the dub send. Tropical mindset. So it needs to coincide with when notes are coming through to really be useful. So I'm just going to set this to back to every, increase the likelihood we'll get some dubs getting thrown. Give it a little slew to smooth it out. But yeah, back to, there we go. That one worked. Now it's too often though. Set at 15% maybe. And like, let's make it a shorter section actually, maybe eighth notes. Be more often, but 11% of eighth notes. That dub will get thrown to, and again, similar to the reverb, I have this tendency to put that steep high pass prior to the echo just to avoid unwanted muddiness in all cases, so the potentially muddy frequencies never even reach it. But okay, so we have Pattern Engine churning away on this breakbeat, and the frequency is not so dynamic. Now I could use a sample and hold on that, and I might just elect to do so. However, I actually think it'd be fine, seeing as the pattern of the velocity is being randomized every 4 bars. It's already somewhat random. So I'm going to select velocity as the key tracking source, and I'm going to make sure the velocity is being randomized within a full range of 1 to 127. So get some lower values. I'm going to go ahead and map that to the frequency there. Maybe not quite to that degree. So now, oh yeah, that's getting way more lively. And another trick that can be real fun, might make it a little too squishy, but I'm a fan of doing this anyway. And it's what we do is we put a delay on there. Nice and short. Okay, see, that's already just giving it some new life. Going down to the swamp. Going down to the swamp store. Anybody need any swamp? Okay. What I was gonna do was, yeah, I don't want it to follow the same pattern as the, well, let's try it. Let's try taking that velocity pattern and let's map it in an inverse direction. So the higher velocity, we get shorter delay times. Yeah, I was going to throw a sample and hold on there, but this is doing just fine. Give it a little smoothing just to, you know, safety first and all that. So this is harnessing rather than a per note randomization from our MIDI sample and hold. We're taking the velocity values that are essentially being randomized just every 4 bars, right? So you get more of like randomization that repeats and becomes a pattern. So I think there's something useful there. Where else should we look at using the pattern engine? Oh, yeah, I said I was going to use these patterns for some percussion. So yeah, let's go ahead and maybe let's do another operator. Why not? Yeah. Go to a white noise on that and need to quantize this. That's working. Yeah, I think that course 10 is enough. And then, you know, group this to a rack, drop a little. Whoops, I wanted to not map the sine wave decay, but map the noise decay. Let's get those both mapped to the same dial here. Well, I think it needs the coarse oscillator to really hear the dynamic between the two pitches there. Otherwise, it just sounds kind of like 16th notes, doesn't it? Okay, well, in that case, I might as well add another oscillator or two, give it a little more character. Something like a square wave here, maybe. Getting sticky. Nice and dynamic. It's working. It's working for me. 3-bar pattern? Why not? In fact, in my view, might just keep it unspooling in a more interesting way. How long is this one? 5 bars. Sure. I'm gonna option drag and let's make this one 4 bars. A little bit more. Oh yeah. Those auto dubbers are doing work. That was the auto dubber. The origin of that was a friend of mine, Dean Grenier, who's just got a new release coming out called Embrace, which is quite a tune. And he was one of the early beta testers for Pattern Engine and called me one day and he asked if there was a device like this. He wanted, you know, to get these intermittent dub throws. I said, well, you know, LFO has a bins mode. And he said, yeah, but, you know, there's an equal chance that the bins will be minimum or maximum. I want something that lives at minimum and occasionally goes maximum. I said, okay, I see your point, and set about creating it. A lot of my early experimentations with all this were trying to, you know, figure out stuff that I needed and stuff that my friends needed. And, you know, I try to remain open to ideas and requests. So if you ever have any ideas or thoughts, please join the Discord and, yeah, get in touch. I try to be active in there and it's a good time. So hope y'all got something out of this. I know there's some real OGs in the chat who've been using Pattern Engine for quite a long time. But, you know, hopefully even the OGs got something out of it. And if you're new to Pattern Engine, if you're new to the Pattern Engine game, it is on sale right now. I'd be remiss not to mention. I did not like how that pad came in all plotslish. I know it's padlish, but it shouldn't be plotslish. There we go. That's a little more like it. Look at that big old chord stack. Wow. Egregious. Antoine, welcome. Been using dubbers to delay the feedback nice and high for a while, then have it cut. Exactly, yeah. And, you know, you can use it to do all kinds of things, like, let's use Auto Dubber with another Pattern Engine to try one last thing that occurred to me the other day, which I've not yet had a chance to test. Okay, so let's go ahead. Let's go back. Let's just do a whole new track here. And what I'm going to do is, yeah, let's grab, just for expediency's sake, let's Let's grab something like electric so it can be really distinctive. And then I'll group it to a rack. And then I will add drift to that. And I want to put them in a chain selector where it does one or the other. And I'm going to map this to macro 1. And you know, there are a variety of ways to set up what I'm doing here, but essentially I want this to be a 1 or a 0. And I'm just going to check. Okay, it's here or it's there. Okay. Let's actually set them to the other settings. I want drift mostly, and then occasionally the electric. And if my big dumb mouse will grab this thing. What the heck? Okay. I tried to make my mouse bigger so everyone can see it, and now it's causing me issues. Okay, there we go. So now, yes. Okay, good. Now I will grab our pattern engine, of course, to get something interesting going on here. Okay. Not the most impressive work we've done today, but can't win them all. The point is, what I wanted to try here, okay, let's get this going with a little more glide situation. And then the electric will probably benefit from some kind of chord, right? I'm just setting the scene here. We don't need the chain selector anymore. Give it the old 2, 3, 4, and I'll probably want to modulate some of those parameters, or at least just change them a bit. And so then, right, back to the auto dubber, and I'm going to use it to basically, some of you might have an idea already, auto dub hocketing device. Exactly. So I guess there'll be latency if I use the yeah, it's fine. It's fine. Okay, so let's make it a little less frequent that it goes to the keys, 33% of the time. And let's say that when it does that, it also goes to the dub factor. Now, it's a little loud, the keys there, I think. Yeah, maybe I'll bring up the percentage a bit. But you can see what I'm getting at here. Auto dub, auto hocketing. Give it a little slew so it doesn't dip all the way down between quarter notes there. Probably 2% is enough. So it's following the same contour of the pattern engine generated pattern, but then occasionally getting thrown over to the electric with the chord and simultaneously to the dub echoes there. So, and then increase the chance. And now it's staying on the keys, right, at 100%. So 50% has got more or less an equal chance of being one side or the other, like a typical bins. But by reducing the chance, then we're just occasionally splashing into the chords there. So yeah, that more or less concludes today's session. We've covered a lot of ground with the pattern engine. If there are any last questions anybody has right now about anything I showed or worked with, let me know. And then we'll wrap it up and call it a day here. It was a fun one. I'm happy how this turned out. Maybe what I'll do is go ahead and grab our MIDI Sample and Hold Pro. Get some of the multi-mappers going onto the electric and the drift. Yeah, those are getting so much more dynamic now, right? Oh yeah, I gotta map this. Have I ever made a Rube Goldberg machine out of my devices? What do you call this, my friend? Feels like a bit of a Rube Goldberg device. No, I don't know if I've ever made a true Rube Goldberg device. A Rude Goldberg device, maybe. Pattern engine soon. Oh, that's what I didn't do today. Last little trick. I'll do a deep pattern engine soon, but something I love to do here. Let me see. How can I get this set up? That's just too much rando on the synth freak there. Yeah, you know what? I'll just go ahead and put it on the drift. And it's going to be way too crazy. I'm going to set it to the fill mode. And I actually don't want it to randomize the rate. I'm just going to set it to 30-second notes. 25% chance. In fill mode, the between notes, it will add these. I'll set it to a receive mode. So it'll be a couple octaves above whatever note came in. Some chaos to randomize the note pitches, some note pitch decay, velocity decay, note length decay. It's too much note decay there. Give a little pitch LFO. And now just 11% of the time we're going to get these squeaky little intricate ornaments happening. It's funny they're going through the dub effect. I think I'd bring their velocity way down so they're not quite so dominant. I think I might have just combined the Rube Goldberg suggestion with the Pulse Engine suggestion. Yeah, it's cruising along here. Thanks for the input. It's always fun. But yeah, that's a great suggestion. It has been way too long, Kev. I think maybe that will be the topic of the next session, to do a proper Pulse Engine. Yeah, it outputs some sublime stuff. Your words, not mine, but you know, it can be misused, and I've done some very egregious stuff with it from time to time. But when you rein it in a bit, sublime can be the word. Little hold percentage, maybe. Okay. Now it's all just this living, breathing, dynamic mess with just this basic 808 kick cruising along. All right, maybe I'll make a tune out of this. Maybe I'll make a few tunes out of this. But yeah, manifest.audio. Learn more about Pattern Engine and all the other tools there. The new Sample and Hold Pro. Pulse Engine, all the business. Don't forget to record your MIDI, whether in a take lane or capturing it into a track. Hopefully everyone got some new ideas, tips and tricks out of this. Had a blast. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.